Hi everyone, it's Cheryl from the Lifestyle Digs coming to you today from my sun deck. I'm on the porch swing again. We seem to get a little bit of traffic noise all of a sudden, but I've had to come outside because I have tried several times now, at least 3 times, to make the same video, and it's called I Dated a Hillbilly. It almost sounds like it could be a TV series or maybe a movie. I dated a hillbilly. And the problem is, every time I start to film this, my other dog, this is Shadow, she's my sweetie and she's very quiet. My other dog, Chica, the black lab, is somewhat of a drama queen. She always shows up and starts stress panting. And when she stress pants, she sounds like a freight train is going by. So I've come outside and hopefully I can get this going. So back in the mid-'80s, I moved up country in British Columbia to the interior, a place called Kamloops. I actually lived a little bit out of town in an area of Kamloops called Cherry Creek, which is a lot of farm and ranch land out there. It took me a long time to find a job, and I finally found a job at a place called Florido's. And Florido's is an egg grading station, or I should say was, because it's no longer operating as an egg grading station. But Florido's was a place where local farmers that raised hens for egg consumption, they would truck in their eggs, and this would be the facility where the eggs get washed. They go through a candling station, and that means that there is a light underneath the eggs, and the person that's in the candler booth would be able to see if there's like a rotten egg or blood or cracked or some kind of imperfection that you wouldn't want to go to the general public for retail consumption. And then they go down this conveyor belt, and then by weight, the conveyor belt figures out which lane to send them down: large egg, medium egg, small eggs, and then they get into egg cartons. That's what I'm looking for, egg cartons. Then they come up another little conveyor belt, and when they come up the conveyor belt, those of us that are there, we would close the egg carton, put the egg carton into a box, and then I don't know, about maybe about 9 or 12 or 15. I can't remember how many egg cartons fit in a box, but once the box was full, then we would tape it and it goes on a skid, and then it would eventually be shipped off to various grocery stores. So while I was working there, I met a lady named Margaret, and she lived nearby. First of all, the egg grading station, this is important, is in Knutsford. Knutsford is near Kamloops, out the other side of Kamloops, opposite from Cherry Creek. And Margaret was a very nice lady. And Knutsford, with a K, Knutsford, so, nuts from Knutsford. Anyway, Margaret was a very nice lady, and her son, Jim, was the fellow who I ended up dating. That's how I met Jim. And Margaret lived down the road a piece. They had a 3/4 section, and I think that's just somewhat under 500 acres, and they had cattle. So they sold the cattle at market every fall, and that's how she made her money. But really, to keep her farm running, she had to work at the egg grading station as well. And she'd been there for a number of years. Like the people the Florido family, she'd known them all her life. The woman Florido there was a fellow named Fred. She married Fred, so Fred married into the Florido family, and then Fred kind of ran the egg grading station and the hen houses. They also had hens and eggs in their properties as well. But I worked in the egg grading station. So I met Jim, and we started going out. And there were 2 houses on Margaret's property. The house that she lived in. There was also a mobile home right next to her house, and her father lived there. And Jim lived about a mile further down the road in a house that was formerly, his grandparents had formerly lived in that house. And one of the nice things about his house, it had indoor plumbing. And Margaret's house did not. It was just a shack. It was a 2-bedroom shack with a kitchen, eating area, and then a small living room area that was heated with a wood stove. And she had an outhouse out behind the shack, and they only had cold running water in the house. And this was a problem in the winter months. Obviously, Kamloops is freezing temperatures most, for half the year, it seems like. And the water would sometimes freeze, and more to the point, when you drain the water down the kitchen sink, it would freeze in the somewhat rubber hose that was going out, as it were. Then they would have to boil water on the stove and then run that down the sink to try to thaw it. She did have electricity in the house, so it wasn't all bad. But they had all these cars. They must have had about 24 cars on the property that were parked on a hill, and just broken down cars. They were there. They all drove broken down cars themselves, older cars. And one of the things that they used to do was they used to siphon gas out of each other's gas tanks. So if your car was almost running on fumes, you would park beside somebody else's car, get a rubber hose, suck the gas, and then get the hose into the gas tank really fast and fill up your own car. Anyway, I was pretty lucky. The car I drove at the time, a Honda Accord, it had a locking gas cap, so they really couldn't get into my gas. So that was a great thing. But it was just a very weird situation. Jim was a great guy. We had a lot of fun. He only had about a grade 9 education, but he was very smart mechanically. He was able to put a motorbike together out of scrap parts and build himself a motorbike. And to keep all these old clunkers running, he was also very good mechanically with cars and stuff. So the only reason I'm kind of remembering back in the olden days when I went out with Jim is I was watching an episode of either 48 Hours or Dateline about a month ago, and there was a con artist, and he had like easily a dozen women that he'd stolen money from, and with that money he would romance his next woman, and he was eventually put in jail. But as part of the series, it says, have you ever checked to see what no boyfriend is doing? So I decided to look online and see if I could find anything on Jim, and really there's nothing. Jim was not a spectacular person. He, nice guy. Like I say, we had a lot of fun, but he wasn't very responsible. He had a job when British Columbia was building a new highway called the Coquihalla, and he had a chainsaw. He had to saw down trees that were in the way. And there was a bus that took all the people out to the job site, and because there would be other workers as well. And he would sleep in, and he missed the bus. He got fired. This happened a couple of times, so he got fired. Well, if I had a job that was paying $20-25 an hour back in the mid '80s, I mean, it's still good money today, but back then it was very good money. I would buy an alarm clock or a clock radio, or somehow get myself so I could get out of bed and keep my job. But he didn't, and there were times when I would show up at his place, and it was winter, and I'd stop at his mother's house first because he would have to stop there and feed the animals, and they were all standing there. The animals had no food. They were looking at me. They would start, mooing or braying or whatever they were, and then I'd go up to his house, and he'd be lying in bed, and this would be 10:30 in the morning, and it's like, what the hell, you got these animals, counting on you for food, and your mother's counting on you to take care of them because you don't have a job right now because you got fired from that really good paying Coquihalla job. So clearly Jim was not going to be a long-term prospect for me because he just wasn't too responsible. But anyway, I did look him up online, and it was a court case. It was nothing that he had done. He was only mentioned in it because it was a car crash. There were several people, down on your luck, homeless type of people that were in the back of a pickup truck. So they weren't seat belted in. The pickup truck got in an accident. It flipped, and a lot of these people were injured. And the person driving the truck turned out that her grandfather is Fred. So it's got to be the same Fred from the Florida farm, because that was where these workers were. They were working in this hen barn, and they were moving hens around, and so it was mentioned about Fred, and he had 2 daughters. Well, I remember the 2 daughters that came into the egg grading station from time to time in the summer, and they helped when we were busy or we were down on staff. There was also at least one other daughter who was a lot younger, maybe about 8 or 9. So the 2 teenage daughters are about 10 years younger than me, and So there was Fred, who worked at the farm, his daughter, and they talked about the daughter, and they said her husband Jim did some occasional mechanical work on the property. So that was his only mention. But the big problem was the granddaughter who was in the accident, her aunt who worked with her father, and so that there they were all mentioned. But it was quite an interesting read, and it was rather unfortunate because it was something that happened on a cold night, and it was freezing temperatures, and I guess Fred had taken a van to pick up some of these people from the homeless shelter, and you know, it was good money for them. I think it paid about $30 for a couple hours of work, so they could all use this kind of money. But there you go, Hillbilly, cars in various states of disrepair. I was just amazed actually to hear that my ex Jim had married, but this whole inbreeding with the Hillbilly thing, because you know this was obviously, you know, a Fred Florido descendant. His wife must be about at least 10 years younger than him. And you know, when I met Margaret, her ex-husband Jim's father lived nearby, lived in the same Knutsford area, and he he was either living, or his former girlfriend was her current boyfriend's ex. So like I say, there's all this hillbilly inbreeding that goes on in Knutsford. So that was just kind of a bit of a blast from my past, and the times that I dated a hillbilly, and although it was a fun experience, this hillbilly just was not a responsible enough person for me to continue on a relationship with. So there you go. There's Cheryl from the Lifestyle Digs saying goodbye, and thanks for listening to my story of how I dated a hillbilly.